what I wanted to do today was to say two things. One, I think Miss Robin Finley might join us today. So if you see her, say hi. She may want to make an announcement or two. I think she's checking on several things, but she wants to find out about the Moodle situation, if it's working for people who still needs help getting their work uploaded to Moodle. I don't see her yet, though, so she may not come today after all. And the second thing is today I'm going to try the PowerPoint slideshow. Ooh, it's got a white background and I'm wearing a white sweater in celebration. Ooh, okay, I'm not, I'm just wearing a white sweater. I was trying to make it look like I planned it, you know, thematically. So today we're going to talk about definitions, comparison contrast, and classification. 3 different ways of grouping or organizing your material according to these rhetorical modes that we've been looking at: narration, narrative, process analysis, illustration. So I think they're going to go through the whole 9 in this week, which means we have 2 more to do tomorrow, at least. So I'm going to see if I can make it move. Can you see the English 116 week 2 day 3 overview?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I was going to say, otherwise it's really no great loss. Is it moving? No, I have to click. Oh, definition. That's big. To define something is to explain clearly what a word or a term means. As you write, sometimes you'll need to explain words or terms that you suspect your reader won't know. You could put them in parentheses, I suppose, or you could just define them. There are many ways to. There are 3 basic ways: by synonym, something that means exactly the same, a word that means exactly the same; definition by class; and definition by negation. So by class, you could take, can you see this beverage? You could say this is a beverage. This is a sugary beverage. This is a soda. And then you could say it is a Coca-Cola soda. Then you could even say it's a Coca-Cola Classic, and you could say it's a cold Coca-Cola Classic. So you can start with the general terms and go down until you get to the specific thing that you wanted to talk about. I was going to bring out a tangerine, but my tangerines look a little, well, they're a little bit rough. I was going to hold up a tangerine and I was going to say, you can say that is food. You can say that is a fruit. It is a citrus fruit. It is a tangerine. It is a sun-kissed tangerine. And if you knew more about it, you could even go further. So you can classify as specifically as you want, and that often helps people to define or understand terms. And then you can define by negation. You can say what it is not. I think sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes I think it's not a great way to define what you're for by saying what you're against. And to define something by what it's not is sometimes a little bit difficult. I would, it can be done. It can be done. The skill of defining clearly will be used in such courses as psychology, business, the sciences, history, and English. Also in philosophy. Anytime you write a paper about a technical term or idea or process, or anytime you define something like we did for I think tomorrow we're going to do family. Or was that for today? That was for today, family. So you've already had a little bit of experience doing this, just jumping in. To define a term simply, you just supply a synonym, not the same word. So you can't use the word again to define a term. And that makes sense. Usually in a paper, you don't do that. But sometimes in conversation, we say it even louder, and then we think that's been defined. My mom is one who defines things by saying them more loudly. Anyway, here's some examples. Gregarious means sociable. I thought garrulous meant sociable, and I said last summer that my father was garrulous, and my mom and my aunt said, that's not what that word means. And I was surprised because they both have Alzheimer's. And they both were like, no, that's wrong. And they were right, and I was completely wrong. Gregarious means sociable. And so I learned. It was humbling. To procrastinate means to postpone needlessly. I don't know why I'm defining that for you. It's just the examples. A wraith is a ghost or a phantom. That is a word I don't think you're going to need much in your life, but now you know, if you didn't already know. And I have to say, I learned something when I saw that myself. Adroit is skillfully, adroitly is skillfully. Comes from the French, it means something about the right hand. Definition by class. So this is the second way you can do it. Look at me getting all excited to convey excitement to you all, to make this more interesting. Is it working? Are you excited? We're going to learn about definition by class. Yay! First, the writer places the word into a larger category. Lemonade is a drink. And then the writer sometimes provides distinguishing characteristics if you go lower. Lemonade is a drink made of lemons, sugar, and water. You might say lemonade is a drink that is popular in the summer, or lemonade is a drink that is drunk by people in these countries. But you move down in the category to kind of put it into a class when you're defining it. They do it again with orphan. An orphan is a child, but it is a specific type of child. The classification is a child without living parents. I have a confession to make. My high school mascot, the orphans. We're the only high school in the country to have that name. And we won a USA Today contest for having one of the most unusual names. It came with, people could vote, and it came with, I don't know, a little prize money attached to the school. And I have to say, I don't know if they should reward us for having the name the Orphans. It's kind of sad. It's kind of a sad little name, but we just all grew up with it. A dictatorship is a form of government. And then if you go down lower, distinguishing characteristics or details that make this idea different from all others in that category would be a dictatorship is a form of government in which one person has absolute control over his or her subjects. So you see how definition goes. It's kind of like the topic sentence that has the controlling idea and the topic. It's two parts. The class definition has two parts. Okay, that was fun. Definition by negation, by negating, by saying what it is not. It means that the writer first says what something is not, and then says what it is. For example, a good parent does not just feed and clothe the child, but also loves, accepts, and supports that child for who he or she is. College is not just a place to have a good time, but a place to grow intellectually and emotionally. Oh, here's one. Liberty does not mean having the right to do what you please, but carries the obligation to respect the rights of others. So what it doesn't mean, what it does mean. I almost felt like I was at Hamilton with that Liberty one. Did anybody see Hamilton this summer on Disney Plus? That's the only reason we have Disney Plus. We wanted to see Hamilton. And you know what? I found out yesterday from one of my friends, she saw it in person in a traveling show. She lives in Colorado. Disney Plus, I don't know, $10 a month. She saw the show for $300. So while I was thinking, is it worth it for us to get Disney Plus? It's a lot less than $300. I almost fell over when she said that she had seen a show that cost her $300. And she thought it was a bargain. It's a good show. All right, definition by negation. Are there questions about definition by negation? Somebody say no, just for the humor of it. Somebody say no.
No.
Thank you, thank you. No, we don't want to hear any more about negation. Thank you. The definition paragraph. Self-explanatory, but here we go. Sometimes the writer may need an entire paragraph in which he or she develops the definition by means of a lot of different techniques, such as examples, descriptions, comparisons, contrasts, and so forth. And I want to talk about comparisons. These are analogies, and very often we tell somebody about a new idea by comparing it, by drawing an analogy to something similar. For example, if you're telling somebody about work and they're new to the work world, but they've gone to school, you might say, well, having a job is a lot like going to school. You have to show up on time. You can't sleep. You can't be drunk. And there you have explained some of the similarities. It helps them understand. I just said that to see who was listening. It's a silly analogy. But sometimes we do that. We compare it to something we already know. That's a really good educational technique, actually, to connect what new ideas are coming to ideas that the students already know. And it's a nice way for you to help your reader understand a new idea by showing them how it compares to something they already know. How college might be similar to high school, how it might be different. So you might define by examples, descriptions, comparisons, contrasts, how they're different. Contrast is different, comparison is how they're the same, and so forth. Here they have a flashbulb memory. It's pretty strong. It's pretty strong, but does anyone want to read it? It's about
What
different.
page are we on?
Oh, it's on the actual slideshow slide. Can you see it on the screen?
Oh, okay.
It's harder to read on the screen, isn't it? Because your eyes have to go all the way back and forth. I'm sorry.
The definition of a paragraph?
Yes, and down below, they're giving us an example of how they're developing this idea, this definition, the definition
Okay.
of flashbulb memory. So let's hear what it is.
A flashbulb memory can be defined as a vivid and long-lasting memory formed at the moment a person experiences a highly emotional event. It is as though a mental flashbulb pops, preserving the moment in great detail. Although flashbulb memories can be personal, they often are triggered by public events. For example, many older Americans recall exactly what they were doing when they learned that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated in Dallas. Time froze as people crowded around their radios and televisions to find out what had happened. Many more people recall in detail the shocking events of September 11, 2001, when hijacked airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center. Millions of people watched television as the horrifying scenes of the terror attack unfolded. The images of the towers collapsing is burnt into the minds of people the world over. Making it a flashbulb memory for an entire generation. As these examples show, flashbulb memories mark some of the most permanent and haunting experiences, moments that were scored into our minds.
Nicely done. Yeah, nicely done. I don't know. Many of our students are not young enough, or not old enough to remember when President Kennedy was assassinated. And now I find that many of my students weren't very old when September 11th happened, and they don't really remember it either. So these may not be flashbulb memories for you. You may have seen them on the news or heard family members. By the way, do you know why they call it flashbulb? The cameras used to have a bulb on top that made the flash go off. And I don't think that that's a commonly seen thing anymore. You had to buy them in a little box. You could get 3 little square flash bulbs, and they would snap into the top of your camera, and they would turn and they would flash on each side. And then you would take them off when they were used up and put another one on. Little flash bulbs. They're like light bulbs. There was an assignment. You could have your students interview family members from different generations and ask them about historical events, flashbulb moments in their life, so that they could write their memories, and it would kind of be a way of understanding history through the eyes of your own family. Although I think it's a little bit sad, but it would be interesting maybe to do. I've seen that done. I'm going to move to the next one. We're going to move on to the next slide. Oh, my husband had the mouse and I can use the arrows. Here's a checklist for writing the process of writing a definition paragraph. There's a whole process. First, you're going to narrow your topic to fit your audience and your purpose. Then you're going to come up with a topic sentence that uses one of the 3 basic methods of definition used in this chapter: synonym, class, or negation. You're going to decide on the method of paragraph development that's best suited to what you want to say. And then you're going to free write or brainstorm to generate ideas. You may want to free write or brainstorm before you narrow the topic. Have we talked about free writing at all? All right, we will. Free writing is a topic that was actually invented by a guy named Peter Elbow. True story, that's his real name. And he said that one of the best ways to teach writing is, or to write, is to get ideas by free writing. And so very often a teacher will let the class or ask the class to free write on a topic before they begin to compose their thoughts. And so the topic may be very general, such as freedom or dentist, or it may be specific, but generally the most free writing is just kind of, here's the idea, write on it. And you write as if you were brainstorming. You don't allow yourself to try to worry about if it's a good thing you're writing or it's not well written. You don't worry about making it perfect. And you just keep writing until the time is up. Afterwards, you can look at it. And sometimes just writing about things makes you have more ideas. If you can't get started, you can simply write the word over again, over again, over again. Dentist, 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 until something kicks in and maybe you come up with an idea. Sometimes you can look back at what you've free written and you can build on a paragraph or a section of it. Sometimes it just gave you an idea, but sometimes you can actually use it as the basis of your writing. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is to generate ideas. It's similar to brainstorming, but it's just writing and until the page is half done. Write for 15 minutes, free writing. I usually teach writing and I ask people to free write, but I do a modified free write where I give them a topic and ask them to free write for 15 minutes. And that's a really good activity because research says the way to write and the way to get better at writing is to write. So you have to do it. If you have trouble coming up with ideas, another strategy is to just draw. And if you can only draw triangles for a little bit, apparently that can move the thought process off of the front burner and maybe put it in a different section, the graphic section, and it lets you think of ideas. Sometimes walking away and getting a good night's sleep can actually help you come up with ideas. There are some famous stories of how people have had a problem, an issue that they wanted to solve. They couldn't, they were thinking about it so much. This is me thinking. And they went to sleep. And when they woke up, it had sort of resolved. And there's a really famous one about the guy who invented who figured out the chemical structure of the benzene ring. And it happened when he was asleep. He was trying to hook the molecules together and their rules. A carbon has to have 4 partners and oxygen can have 2 partners. Hydrogen can only have 1. And he could figure out how many hydrogens were in benzene and how many carbons were in the benzene and how many hydrogens, carbons and oxygens. But there was still places where they should be hanging on to something else, another oxygen, another hydrogen, and they weren't. So the math didn't add up. And he kept thinking, how can this be? What's the structure of this molecule that it has 6 carbons and they should all have oxygens and they should all have hydrogens connected to them, but the numbers that they have should add up to these and they're not. And he went to sleep. And he had a dream that the carbon chain turned into a snake and the snake bit its own tail. And he woke up and he remembered that it was a ring. So just dreaming about the snake, he was able to put the problem, the issue he was thinking about, put it aside for a while. He even went to sleep and in that time he was able to solve it. So I don't know if you always have time to do that when you're brainstorming for ideas, but you can. And that's a nice way to do it. So you may want to free write or brainstorm. Brainstorm is just kind of making a list of things that you might want to write about before you narrow the topic. Then you're going to move on to step 5, select the best ideas, drop any ideas that don't clearly relate to the definition in your topic sentence. That's going to be the schematic, the outline pattern for your paper. Then make the full outline, the plan, write a draft of your definition paragraph, revise as necessary, checking for support, details that support it, for unity, everything in there makes sense and supports that one idea, for logic and coherence, like it flows. Then proofread for errors in grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, spelling, and mechanics. Revision is important. Revision is a step that often gets overlooked. We just finished just in time to turn it in and we're like, oh, it's done. I don't want to look at it one more time. But in reality, probably revision is a key step to making it better. Sometimes to catching errors, but sometimes to actually making the changes needed to make the piece more coherent, more logical, not just looking at spelling errors or grammar errors. I don't know if I told you when I went to college, when I went to grad school, we had Mark Twain's writings in our library. He had left them, I guess, to the library, and we got to see them. One day we all got to traipse up and they brought out some of his papers, and we saw in one set of papers, he had rewritten a passage, not 2 times, not 4 times, 28 times. 28 times. So even professionals do rewriting, you know. I thought it was amazing. I don't expect you to revise 28 times, but sometimes it makes it shorter. Sometimes it makes it tighter, leaner, meaner. Some people say, I'm sorry, my writing isn't very short, is too long. I didn't have time to make it shorter. Have you heard that? Anyway, that's the process of writing a definition paragraph. It's very specific. And maybe it will help you as you write your own definition texts in the future. Here we go for the next thing. Here are some suggested topics for definition paragraphs. The gossip, or the life of the party, internet addict, coworker from hell. Could write about professionalism, identity theft, a term from your field of study like green building, concussions, Oedipus complex, Harlem Renaissance, Pacific garbage patch, Baroque. I don't see any medical. Oh, concussion, that's medical. A term from popular culture, Spanglish, sampling in music, whistleblower, Twitter, avatar, underemployment, terrorism, a disability, a military symbol or term, a slang term you and your friends use, urban legends. They suggest you see Snopes to see if they're true. Plagiarism. I looked, I was like an English teacher kind of, I was like, oh, you could write about plagiarism. That would be fun for you. Domestic violence or disenfranchisement. So they have some topics of things that are kind of important enough to merit a look, a definition. Are there questions about definition paragraphs? Comments? Things you want to share? Nope.
I have a question. I just wonder how you feel about words that aren't English words but have been adopted to our language, like Uber or sans. Do you have to define those in a parentheses, or are they just accepted as how we talk?
It's really interesting that you ask that. If a word is borrowed from another language and it's still considered foreign, you put it in italics, and then you might want to actually define it. If it's borrowed but it's in common usage, etc., it doesn't necessarily have to be defined. Etc. is a Latin word. It's actually 2 words, but we've borrowed it. We use it so much, so it's kind of at some point a little bit of a judgment call. But if you say Uber, it's probably in common usage. If it's still foreign and you're using it and it's kind of a word that not everybody would know, then you should use it in italics to let them know, yeah, you're not reading wrong, and then you should define it. Because when you talk about a word as a word, you italicize it. So here, when they're in number 4, a term from your field of study, when they're talking about a word as a word, like green building or Oedipus complex, they actually italicize it. You can also put quotation marks around it, but that's a little bit difficult to navigate. It gets a little clunky. I don't know why I'm doing air quotes. I'm sorry, I'll stop. I did the parentheses the other day, and actually I should do italics for you because I can do them. This is italics. Can you see? I'm leaning. It works better when I'm standing before the class, but you should italicize your words. Yeah, feel free. It's dedication to teaching. I'm putting my heart in it, or at least my upper body. Okay, very nice. More questions? Not right now. Can I tell you about et cetera? If I could have a big pen, I will tell you. I'll tell you at the end of class. We're going to move on. Comparison and contrast. Comparison means to show how something is similar. In labor negotiations, often workers want parity with another group of workers or the same workers in another city. Parity means the same. Pair, P-A-R, means the same. Comparison is how you, has that P-A-R in there, means how things are the similar or the same. And contrasts are how they differ, how they're different. There are 3 different ways to set up a comparison and contrast study. It usually works best if you only have 2 items. It works well at work if you're talking about perhaps 2 software systems that you might want to consider buying for your workplace, and you want to look at both of them, and you're making a small presentation. You might compare 2 things at work and show how they're similar, how they're different, and what is the better one. So here they go. Comparison they do it. I call it comparison and contrast, and now they're calling it contrast and compare. To contrast 2 persons, places, or things is to examine the ways in which they're different. We just said that. To compare them is to examine the ways in which they're similar. These are useful skills in daily life, in work, and in college. We do it all the time. A contrast paragraph, we're going to look at how things are different. Does anyone want to read this paragraph? It's a very long, detailed paragraph written by a man named Maurice Bosco. He's a student.
I'll read it.
Okay, thanks.
Although soul and hip hop both spring from African American roots, they are very different musical expressions. Soul music borrows from gospel and rhythm and blues. The singer's voice, backed up by live instruments, soars with emotion and with soul. This music captures the optimism of its time, the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and hope for social change. There are 2 types of soul, the smooth Detroit style of the Supreme, Stevie Wonder, and the Temptations, and the more gritty, gospel-driven Memphis style of Otis Redding and Booker T, and the ENGs. Soul music is upbeat and often joyful. Its subjects are love and affirmation of the human condition. On the other hand, hip-hop, or rap, draws on hard rock, funk, and techno. The rapper chants, rhymes against a driving instrumental background that may be pre-recorded. Rap grew out of the New York ghettos in the late 1970s and the 1980s, when crack and guns flooded the hood and many dreams seemed broken. Of the rival East and West Coast rappers, New Yorkers include Grandmaster Flash, LL Cool J, and the murdered Biggie Smalls, while Los Angeles rappers include Ice Cube and the murdered Tupac Shakur. The subjects of hip-hop are racism, crime, and poverty. Both soul and hip-hop claim to tell it like it is. Hip-hop's answer to the soulful 4 tops is the Furious 4. What's in a name? Perhaps the way the listener experiences reality. Maurice Bosco.
Wow, nicely read and nicely written, Maurice. I feel a little old looking at those names. So you see that he was making the contrast, drawing the distinction, making it clear the differences between soul music and hip-hop music, in his opinion. How, although they had these similar roots, they're very different. And he outlined several differences. I was looking at that word Booker T and the MGs, that name. Sometimes I have a quote that I use with students by Booker T. Washington, who was a writer. He founded Tuskegee University. And I wonder why we always called him Booker T. Washington. Were there other Booker Washingtons? And now I see there are. Well, there's another Booker T. Does anybody know what Booker T. Washington's middle name is?
Theodore? It's a guess.
Good guess. I think something for another day. Okay, so they've listed some transitional expressions that you can use for contrast to show that things are different, that they are not the same. Conversely, that means on the other hand, however, in contrast, in opposition. Although, even though, whereas, while, nevertheless, on the contrary, on the one hand, on the other hand, but, and yet. I'm sure there might even be more, but that's a pretty nice list to begin with. It's nice of them. These are available on page A33 for you for your own use at your own time. Here's a comparison paragraph. This is not showing how things are different, but showing instead how they're the same. Anyone want to read it?
In the family, personality traits are said to skip generations. So that might explain why grandfather and I have so much in common. My grandfather arrived in the United States at 16, a Finnish young man from Italy looking for a new life and ready to earn it. He quickly apprenticed himself to a shoe cobbler and never stopped working until he retired 53 years later. Similarly, when I was 14, I asked permission to apply for my first job as a bank teller. My parents smiled and said, "She's just like Grandpa." But everyone else in the family spend money the minute it reaches their hands. My habit of saving every penny does not seem strange to them. My grandfather also careful. My grandfather also was careful with money, building his own shoe repair business out of nothing. He loved to work in large vegetable garden and brought bags of carrots and tomatoes to our house on Saturday mornings. Like him, I enjoyed the feeling of dirt on my fingers and the surprise of seedless sprouting overnight. Though I raised zinnias instead of zucchinis, I know where I inherited a passion to make things grow. Only in opportunities we deferred. Although my grandfather's education ended with third grade, I am fortunate to attend college and hope that education will be my legacy to the generations that come after me.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That is a paragraph where they show the similarities between the author and her grandfather, except for the very end, which I thought was a nice place to put it because it showed a little bit of how they were different, but they saved that for last and it kind of took on more power. Nicely done. 14. First job. How many of you started working when you were 14? Anybody?
I was
Babysitting?
12. I was a
I
babysitter.
did.
Babysitting, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody do yard work, babysitting, tutoring, that kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard working bunch here. You could write paragraphs like this. I think I was 12. I tutored a little bit. And then I did babysitting.
I was a late bloomer. I was 15.
I look at you and I'm like, yeah, 15, still so young for starting working, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, my mom also had us do chores and we had our own household chores, but if we wanted extra money, we could do extra chores, you know, like clean out the garage or clean out something that was kind of a bigger task. And so sometimes summers were a little more lucrative for me because I could earn money cleaning my mom's garage. Well, that was nice. Thank you. They have some transitional expressions, transitions for comparison, just as they had for contrast. Also, as well, equally, in addition, in a similar way, in the same way, likewise, similarly, in the same vein. Anybody else want to think of one? Anything come to mind? Nope. Maybe later. Here's the checklist, the process of writing a comparison or contrast paper that you can refer to this checklist as you write your paragraphs. First, of course, narrow the topic. I think that's the hardest part sometimes, coming up with a topic that's focused enough. And after that, everything kind of falls into place. For me, personally, I don't know. But for me, the hardest part is narrowing the topic. Then you want to compose a topic sentence that clearly states that a comparison or contrast will follow. Let them know what you're doing. And it doesn't have to be as clunky as I will compare these two items. You can be more artful if you want. Free write or brainstorm to generate as many ideas of comparison or of contrast as you can think of. You may want to free write or brainstorm even before you narrow the topic. Choose the points you're going to use. Drop anything that you're not able to fit in that doesn't really make your point. List parallel points of comparison or contrast for both A and B. So make sure that if you want to compare them on cost, or you want to compare them on size, or you want to compare them on taste, make sure that you have something for both of them. Then make a plan or an outline, numbering all the points in the order you'll present them in the paragraph. Oh, that's a nice technique where you number them so you've got your notes and you just go 1, 1, 2, 2. Then write a draft of your comparison contrast paragraph using the transitional expressions that were listed or others that you come up with to kind of emphasize or stress or make clear the differences or the similarities. Then revise as necessary, checking for these qualities, these aspects of your paragraph: support, unity, logic, and coherence. And then, of course, proofread for errors in grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, spelling, and mechanics. Questions? It's very thorough, very writerly. Wow, cool. Questions? No. No. All right. They have suggested some topics just for you to get an idea of how this might work in another setting if you had to choose your own topic completely. 2 attitudes towards money, the spender and the saver, or compare and contrast 2 attitudes towards a partnership, the confirmed single person and the committed partner person. Or you could look at 2 ways of dealing with anger or loss or grief or disappointment, or I suppose any emotion. You could compare or contrast 2 popular TV shows or reality shows or bands or singers. You could compare or contrast being paid a salary versus being paid hourly wages. Compare something, the way that something is done in the United States and the way it is done in another country. That's especially useful if you've lived in another country. You have, maybe insight that the rest of us don't have. You could do it if you lived in 2 different states or 2 different regions of the country. Or if you lived in a rural area and a city, you could compare that kind of thing. You could compare or contrast 2 high schools or 2 colleges, maybe even one in the United States, one in another country. You can compare or contrast 2 sports or 2 athletes in the same sport, 2 entertainers, politicians, professors. You see, it's always 2. You can compare or contrast living off campus or living on campus. Sometimes people want to do things like compare and contrast men and women. I don't recommend that. I think that just opens up the door to a little bit of shortcuts and stereotyping, and may get you, just even saying things that maybe come off a little bit questionably. So I don't recommend that, but you'll have to make those decisions yourself when you're choosing your writing topics. They have a beautiful comparison contrast paragraph if you like baseball. Do we have a person who lives for baseball in this group who wants to read this paragraph? Will, I saw you perk up. Are you a baseball fan? You want to read the paragraph?
Sure. I do like baseball, though. I did play.
Okay. But not necessarily reading aloud. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
You're a nice person.
Thank you. Although contemporary fans would find the game played by the Knickerbockers, the first organized baseball club similar to modern baseball, they would also note some startling differences. In 1845, as now, the 4 bases of the playing field were set in a diamond shape, 90 feet from one another. 9 players took the field. The object of the game was to score points by hitting a pitched ball and running around the bases. The teams changed sides after 3 outs. However, the earlier game was also different. The umpire sat at a table along the third base line instead of standing behind home plate. Unlike the modern game, the players wore no gloves. Rather than firing the ball over the plate at 90 miles an hour, the pitcher gently tossed it underhanded to the batter. Since there were no balls and strikes, the batter could wait for the pitch he wanted. The game ended not with 9 innings, were completed by when one team scored 21 runs, which were called aces.
Oh, I see how they did it. I see how they did it. When you said they didn't have any gloves, I went, what? I was thinking that must hurt. And then you said, well, they're not throwing it. They're throwing it like more like softball. There's some places here in Cleveland you can go to see historical baseball fields. There's the Negro Baseball League. There's one over, I've driven by it, and they restored it a couple of summers back, and you can see where the league played here in Cleveland. You can visit that field. What was their team called? Was it the Spiders?
I think the Knickerbockers.
Was it? Okay. And then if you go to the park by the zoo, the Brook Park Reservation, there's an empty field that's kind of in a circle. It's like an upside down mountain. The hill goes around like that. And there's a picture there. About 100 years ago, they played baseball, like semi-professional ball, and there were 100,000 people who came and sat on the ground to watch that game. And you look at it and you think, how is that possible? It's not big enough, but they have the photograph right there on a pole. It's at the park by the zoo, and it's kind of fun to see that too. Thank you for that. The game ended when somebody had scored 21 runs. I don't know which is shorter. Some baseball games go on for a long time. Did anybody see that 2 summers ago, the World Series that went on till like after midnight? 1, 2. Do you remember that game? Maybe it's just me. I don't follow baseball, but I did actually see that game. Okay, I'm done. Suggested topics for comparison or contrast paragraphs. Compare or contrast 2 different cars you've driven. The requirements of 2 jobs or 2 careers, weddings, parties, or funerals in 2 different cultures, smartphones, Androids, iPhones, videos, websites on similar subjects, your life now compared to your life 5 years ago. Compare and contrast how 2 people you know coped with a similar problem, such as the loss of a job, a divorce, or a death of a family member. Compare and contrast shopping in person and shopping online. 2 popular television shows of the same type, newscasts, talk shows, situation comedies, and so on. Or 2 attitudes towards one subject, firearms or immigration, so on. So there are many, many ideas you could compare and contrast, sort of profitably, not just randomly. I think, you know, for a point, for a reason, to show something, to help people learn something. Not just to compare 2 of your friends. That doesn't seem nice. We move on to the third topic of the day, classification. To classify is to gather into types, kinds, of categories according to a single basis of division. The same information can be classified in more than one way. Here's one paragraph. Gym goers can be classified according to their priorities at the gym as sweaty fanatics, fashionistas, busybodies, and fit people. Sweaty fanatics take gym going to the extreme. They hog the machines, drip sweat everywhere, and barely look up if someone falls off the treadmill beside them. Occasionally, they will stare at the mirror, admiring the muscle group they are working on. Did anybody ever see the Kevin Hart piece where he talks about the guy who prepares the whole time to lift the weights and make sure that everyone is looking at him, and then in the end, he ends up walking away and not even lifting the weights? I just happened to think of that. The fashionistas also admire their own reflections, but barely break a sweat. For them, the gym is just another excuse to buy clothes. They wear perfectly matched workout clothes with color-coordinated sport watches and gym shoes. The third group, the busybodies, can't stop talking. Sorry. Whether it's making idle chit-chat or correcting another exerciser's form on a machine, they seem unable to shut up. Not even headphones and one-word answers can stop the busybodies from babbling. Luckily, the fit normals keep things from getting too far out of control. They come to the gym to work out, stay healthy, and go home, but they remember that basic good manners apply in every setting. I read that because I didn't like the terms and I didn't feel good about making you read it. It seemed like she was trying to be funny, but a little bit rough. That was Lori Zomont, a student. The topic sentence of a classification paragraph, as you can see in this example, usually has two parts. The topic and the basis of classification. Gym goers is the topic, can be classified according to their priorities. That's the basis of classification. So the basis of classification is a controlling idea that we talked about in a topic sentence. It controls how the writer will approach the topic. So it could be gym goers are healthier and happier. That's not where she went. Can be categorized on fitness, but she didn't do that either. She just was looking at their priorities. There is no set rule about which category to present first, second, or last in a classification paragraph. However, the paragraph should follow some kind of logical sequence. I always say save your big point for last. That may not always work. But I say, if you're saying, come to my birthday party, we're going to have Kool-Aid and potato chips and cake. Cake is the big thing. Save it for the end. It sounds more convincing than come to my birthday party. We're going to have cake and Kool-Aid. No, cake and potato chips and Kool-Aid. So to me, if you're building up to a big point and you want to make that point at the end, then maybe save it. I think if it's life-changing and that important, obviously put it at the beginning. I think I told you the Challenger example where it wasn't on the first page. Did I tell you that? Yeah. So for life and death things, put them at the beginning. That's just my suggestion about what order. Sometimes they kind of make their own way because they just, one is related to another topic and it just flows better that way. They've listed and offered us from your book, transitional expressions and classification paragraphs, which stress divisions and categories. Can be divided, can be classified, can be categorized. The first type, the second kind, the last category. They have, I know, there were some, here's the checklist. Narrow the topic in light of your audience and purpose. Decide on a single basis of classification. So sometimes you could classify them in different ways, but they want you to stick to your topic that you've already chosen. Compose a topic sentence that clearly shows what you're dividing. If you wish, you can state the basis on which you're making that classification and the types that will be discussed, sort of a little preview. List the categories into which the group is being classified. Be sure that your categories cover all the possibilities. Do not add any new categories that are not logically part of your original basis of classification. Free write, cluster, or brainstorm to generate ideas. Select the best details and examples and drop those that are not relevant to your classification. Make a plan or outline for your paragraph, numbering the categories in which you will present them. I think that numbering is a nice technique when you're taking notes. If you're neat and tidy, you may not need to. If you take notes as I do, or you kind of use any white space on your paper, then it's easier to find them that way. Select the best details and examples and drop those that are not relevant. And I think that's sometimes hard to do. Sometimes you have to take a second run at it. Make a little outline, make a little plan. I think very often people don't make a plan for their paragraph. They just let it be. But they're saying, you know, it'll be stronger if you do, especially if you're trying to stick to a structure that is specific. Revise as necessary, checking for support, unity, logic, and coherence. Proofread for errors in grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, spelling, and mechanics. Ta-da! I do want to say one more thing about this. If you're choosing things to, if you're choosing topics, I haven't said this about all of them, but you want to make sure that they're at the level of college work or the class, right? I taught a class and we were comparing things, and one student wanted to compare fingers and toes. And I thought, well, if you're going to do that like medically, maybe that's interesting. If you're going to compare fingers and toes, maybe it's not going to be collegiate. Although sometimes I'm completely surprised One student wrote a comparison about whether you had an extra arm or an extra leg, which would be better. And I thought it would be silly, but it was really interesting and deep. So sometimes I'm surprised. One time I had a student compare world wrestling, the worldwide wrestling entertainment, to high art in opera. He said they were both the same. They were both high forms of art, and I thought it was a hard sell, but the paper was great. So sometimes you can take a topic and do a lot with it. I'm just saying, make sure you do it at the level of college writing if you're going to pick things. Here are some topics that they suggest for classification. Coworkers at your job do. Okay. Ways that people might manage their finances, problems facing first-year college students or someone new to a job, websites you may have bookmarked, types of viral videos on YouTube, local restaurants, dancers at a party or club, ways that students prepare for exams, online shoppers, performers of one kind of music, ways of commuting to work or school. That seems so far away since the way I commute to work is I walk into the living room. How about you? Yeah, saves on time. Financial aid sources for college, styles of shoes, hobbies. There are many, many more, myriad more. You've been a great team, a bunch of good sports today. Here's the assignment. It's based on the reading that you did yesterday about Malcolm X copying the entire dictionary. I did not come up with this, but what you're going to do is you're going to find 5 words that are new to you in the dictionary and add them along with their meanings into the text boxes below. I think it's a chance for you to look at words that actually mean something that you might actually use. Or I suppose you could look up archaic words if you're just fascinated and interested in them too. Either way. You want a dictionary definition and then explain it in your own words, make it work for you. There are 5 of them.
Which dictionary do you use?
Which dictionary?
Do you have a preference?
I do not. I had a friend who used to work for Webster's, but she's retired, so I'm not going to push for that. There are many, many good ones. I like Webster's,
Okay.
but are you probably going to use them online? I think if it's a decent dictionary, it's fine. Do you have a preference? I had
like
an
Oxford, but I just didn't know.
Oh, did we talk about the Oxford English Dictionary? Did we ever talk about that in here? Do you know what the Oxford
comma, which I
Yeah,
think is
yeah. The Oxford English Dictionary is put up by the same people, I think, but it is a multi-volume dictionary that is so big that usually it's only owned by colleges because who has the space? And it has every written usage of a word in the English language. And it's a really nice definitive source of if you have a word, well, when did that come up and what are the ways it's been used? And I don't know if you ever saw, there was a movie about it, how it was compiled. Has anybody seen the movie? Somebody told me last month it had Mel Gibson in it. I don't know. I never saw the movie. But in the Civil War, there was a man who had, I think, been a doctor, but he had seen too much battle and he became mentally ill and he ended up killing somebody and he was sentenced to prison. And he got better and he really felt bad for what had happened and he wanted to contribute. So what he was doing was they had a contest and they put out a call, please send in if you find written definitions. He personally contributed over half of the definitions for the dictionary that they were building. And the man he had killed's wife started sending him books to help him. I know. And the book is called The Doctor and the Madman. And it was one person did half of the work of compiling all of the usages of a word. And you can see how fast they change. You can see, if you go to Urban Dictionary right now, you can see how fast words are being invented and put into new dictionaries to help, I don't want to say older people like me, but that's what I'm going to say, learn. Because I don't want to use terms that I don't understand. I've made that mistake before. in class, I designed a lesson and I was going to introduce it using a slang phrase that I thought was, that I thought meant something else. It didn't. And so I was sharing it with my colleague who was working in the library, and she said, that doesn't mean what you think it means. And I said, what does it mean? She said, go to Urban Dictionary. And I did, and I didn't use the phrase. So that's the assignment. It's a little bit of a break, I think, from writing papers. And tomorrow back to the writing of the papers. So I thank you all for coming, for being wonderful readers. Everyone who read, I give you extra thanks and extra props. I can't pull that off, can I? I'm too old for this slang. I'm sorry.
I do have a question. So we have to
Yeah.
pull up new words from, or
Words
just
that you want, look in the dictionary, find a word you want to learn. Or a word that you've heard recently that you thought, I kind of wonder what that means. Am I using that right?
okay.
Yeah.
That makes-
Or a word somebody says. Every so often I'll hear somebody say a word and I'll think, how did I go this long without hearing that word? But I think sometimes you just pay attention more. You know, you hear a word 2 or 3 times and it kind of clicks. Also, words are changing. Words are changing so much. We're changing words that are nouns into verbs, keyboarding, that kind of thing. I can't.
This should
Uber.
be fun.
It should be fun. Should be fun. I had to write a dictionary for my family because my mother and her family have their own vocabulary. If someone is behaving badly, a child, she might call them a rinkus.
Mm.
She has those silly names. We had a few people in my childhood who stayed in our house who were from another country, exchange students. One year when I was in high school, when I had to constantly teach them that these aren't real English words. They're just words from my mother and her family. And I made a little funny dictionary one time, which is helpful. I don't know how you spell rinkus. My dad was asking me the other day and I said, we don't really know. But she means like rascal. So I look forward to your dictionary. I suppose you could do a family dictionary, but I think it's meant for doing more traditional. I look forward to it. I thank you all for coming and I wish you a happy rest of the day.
Thank you.
Right.
You have a good day.
Mondays and Tuesdays.
You too.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks for reading. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for working so hard.
Ms. Boswell.
Yes,
Hi. You didn't grade Mondays and Tuesdays, right? Did I miss that?
I haven't. I
Okay.
don't grade Mondays because I don't get them till Tuesday morning. So
Okay.
I haven't graded them by Tuesday, but you're right. I should have graded them today. After class at noon, I'm going in there and I'm going to be grading as fast as I can. You deserve better.
I was just wondering because I was like, well, maybe she didn't get it right this time, but
No, I got it. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I will be
No.
grading them this afternoon as fast as I can.
okay. Okay. And I did leave you an email, so
Okay, I'll send you
Okay.
a note.
okay. Thank you. All right.
That's a
Bye-bye.
good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
End meeting for all. Does that make it end?